Sunday night is a main event night, the FFPC main event. That is $1 million are on the line. 12 drafters are competing for that grand prize and a $5.91 million prize pool. $2,000 entries. The best of the best are playing in the FFPC main event. I'm your host, Aiden LaCour. Joining me as always is Dave Tripoli. A little early, 7 p.m., a little prime time slot for us. Terp, let's get it kicked off. Preseason week 2 is essentially wrapped up. There's going to be a lot of names, I'm sure, especially later in this draft that we're going to want to cover. But let's start with this first round. There's only so many names you can talk about, right? We've kind of been over all of these guys. But a guy we haven't touched on, I think, a lot, or at least recently, is Austin Ekeler. You've talked a lot about Justin Herbert and your love for him, and then your overall thoughts on the Chargers offense related to Quentin Johnston, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen. But Austin Ekeler is a name that I feel like we haven't discussed a lot. Seems not iffy on, but is there concerns with Kellen Moore and how he might change that passing and could be less checkdowns? Or are you still in on Austin Ekeler as a top half of the first round pick in fantasy this year?
Austin Ekeler is still my running back one. I mean, I just feel like, Kellen Moore could simplify a little bit more and obviously get the ball down the field a little bit. But I feel like Eckler's still going to get targeted a ton. I feel like, you saw Tony Pollard last year, in that offense. Obviously, Justin Herbert is probably excited about the new offense, obviously, stretching it down the field. But they really don't got anybody behind them. No free agent ad yet. Leonard Fournette's still out there. Kareem Hunt's still out there. But Austin Ekeler really has nobody behind him. Joshua Kelly's not very good. Isaiah Spiller is an unknown rookie. I guess you can say he played last year, but he really didn't do much. And they have some couple other guys who are, making preseason splashes. But Eckler's still the guy. It just comes down to, do you want to take Ekeler over some of these stud receivers? And that's really what it comes down to me. Like, I have a main event draft coming up, I think it's next week, where I'm picking 3, and my co-manager is pushing me to take Austin Ekeler. I can't see myself getting to that point, especially with the Kelceys, the Jeffersons, the Chases, and obviously Tyreek and Cooper Kupp. But we'll see if I change my opinion by then. But he's still my running back one, so I'm very high on him. But there's a little bit of worry.
As a noted kind of, not hater, but you're kind of been adamant that you're not on the Bijan train. Preseason debut. And
I'm still off the train. I'm
okay.
still not on the train. Let's clarify that.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that in certain spots, if like in this draft right now, if I was picking number 10, I personally would very highly consider Bijan Robinson.
Okay.
The way this draft is going, I'm not sitting here saying in every draft, but I'm actually very surprised that he's not moving up more. And it's actually something that looking at a lot of main event drafts this week, I'm surprised that these guys have put up a lot of money. We're talking about $2,000, for single entries in this main event. That for all the hype surrounding him, that he's not moving up over some of these receivers. I'm not sitting here saying he's ever going to get in the top 4 or 5, but I could easily see a path that he would be above Diggs, above St. Brown, even above Kupp with the minor injury that he has right now. So I'm surprised he's not moving up. I had a best ball contest the other day that I added him in the 10th pick. And it's the first share I have of them. So I'm trying to add some more of these as we get, closer to the end of the month. But I don't hate him. I just don't think he's a first round pick.
So what were your thoughts on his preseason debut? Because that was where my question was going. Obviously, preseason debut, I believe, was Friday night. Really just played the first drive, had four carries, 20 yards.
Good. Looked very good.
Good catch, 6 yards, and a one-handed one. It's more of just, I know it's just one drive, and it's you can't really extrapolate that out, especially with coaches. They're going to use the rookies more, try and get them the ball to see what they're doing, or their unknown commodities. But the usage was pretty crazy, and kind of tracking to what the people who are high on Bijan are projecting, that workload that he's going to get both in the rushing and receiving game. So I just was wondering if that changed your opinion at all. It seems like you'll pick your spots. We'll get to him when he gets drafted. The Kyle Pitts usage seems a little more concerning because that's just an Arthur Smith as they are who we thought they were, just still not using him a ton. It's just not running a ton of routes, won't get the targets. But that Falcons game was interesting for Drake London and then Bijan, obviously. But I agree with you. You would think that he would.
My thing with the Falcons has not changed. There's 3 things that I worry about. Number 1, Arthur Smith. Mm-hmm. Number 2, he has serviceable running backs behind him. You're not seeing any Cordell Patterson. He's injured. He should be ready for the opening of the season, but he's not out there, so he's not being an annoyance. And just they're going to spread the ball around. There's plenty of just annoying guys around, and I'm not sitting here saying that when it comes down to it, Bijan Robinson is clearly the most talented player on that team. I like Drake London too. I think Kyle Pitts is very talented too, but I don't trust Arthur Smith. I don't trust Desmond Ridder. They're the two biggest things when it comes to these guys that you saw. Desmond Ridder. Yeah, some of these throws that he made were just routine throws that were just awful. So when it comes down to this team, like, one of these guys is going to smash. I've said it a bunch of times. I'll say it again. And if you have that guy, you're going to be sitting pretty. The question is which one and where do the other two fall in at? I think Drake London is still the guy that I would draft more than the rest of the three. I just feel like he has that alpha role with, Matt Collins is an okay NFL receiver, but I just don't think Bijan with Algier, Cordell Patterson being annoying, just Arthur Smith and his just bonehead coaching, Desmond Ridder going to get some time on the ground. I don't know. I'm drafting Robinson a little bit more than I was just to get some exposure, just to not get burned if he just goes, nuclear. But there's just guys I'll take over him at that spot.
Team 6 starts your RB1, Austin Ekeler, and then Derrick Henry. And I know in these kind of season-long managed formats, I guess any format really, you have to get to the big dance. But having Derrick Henry with possibly Austin Ekeler having two of the top running backs with Derrick Henry with that schedule in the championship rounds, what are your thoughts on Derrick Henry? How much of a factor is his schedule per se? Does that come into mind, or is it more just building the best team? And yeah, that's my question. I'm rambling right now. My question to you is, how much do you factor in schedule for the FFPC main event, $2,000 entry, $1 million on the line in this championship rounds? If you take
away Derrick Henry's schedule, I don't think he'd be going as high.
Okay.
Everybody talks about top, 2 or 3 things they like about Derrick Henry is his schedule. And his schedule is very good. Obviously with the Texans, twice in the money rounds. But he has to hold up and get to that point. The Tajay Spears train is running straight at, you saw that run last night. That was, exceptional for, a rookie running back who they said, didn't have legs, didn't have an ACL, didn't have a knee. I mean, you've heard all these crazy things that people have said about him, but he looked good last night. He looked quick. He looked, a guy that is not afraid of contact. And when it comes to Derrick Henry, he's a guy that I'll be even, he's not somebody I'm going out of my way to draft. But if you took away the Texans at the end of the season, which could be just a bloodbath like it almost is every year with him, I think he's a late, mid to late third round pick instead of where he's going.
I wanted to ask you then, you kind of mentioned a couple of guys who are popping in the preseason. I asked you this last week. That was our leadoff question. And you kind of said the Eagles running back uncertainty was kind of your biggest takeaway. What was your biggest takeaway from week 2, if you had one?
You know the answer to this one. Jordan Love looked really good. And everybody in the preseason, I was on a ship by myself with a couple other guys who have started that bandwagon, and it's starting to get heavy. The guys are starting to sink this ship because you saw last night against a Bill Belichick defense, he looked good.
Dicing
there was Jaden Reed, very nice throw to him, nice throw to Romeo Dobbs. Mm-hmm. It's really hard not to be excited with what you've seen so far. Obviously, the games haven't started yet, and there's still a lot of growing pains and stuff that he's going to go through, and I'm okay with that. I'm not sitting here coming out here and say he's going to be a top 5 quarterback this year. I still think there's a couple % chance that that's possible, but he is a low end QB1 by the time the season ends this year, in my opinion. And I liked what I saw. It seems like he's getting a better command of that offense. I mean, once he starts gelling with Christian Watson and, Aaron Jones is out there, it's really hard not to like what you see about Jordan Love.
Of these names, I'm just going to rattle them off. I'm sure more will pop into head. Which of these are you most buying the buzz surrounding from this last week of preseason? Sean Tucker, Tajay Spears, Javonte Williams, Darren Waller, Jalen Hyatt. Those are just 5 off the top of my dome that I give you. Which one are you most kind of
number one is Darren Waller. I mean, he's a guy that I've drafted multiple times on the stream, drafts that we've done on here.
You got some value on Darren Waller.
I've got
3-7 today.
Most of my fifth round Darren Waller, which the time was a little bit early compared to where he was going. But now, I mean, if you want Darren Waller with the preseason hype, catching all those passes on the first round, it's getting to a point where, like you just said, he just went 3-7. I mean, that's where you're gonna have to take him then, and I'm fine with that. I mean, because I genuinely believe he has tight end one upside in that offense if he stays healthy. I just feel like Daniel Jones is going to take the next step this year. I think they're the second best team in that division, and I just really feel like he's a guy that I'm trying to buy as much as possible. If you're looking at the guys who are getting drafted around them, would you rather have Darren Waller? Would you rather have Joe Mixon? Would you rather have Amari Cooper? Calvin Ridley even has questions. I'll take the guy in a premium that the FFPC offers, and he's a guy that, sign me up for. There's all those guys you mentioned all have their own set of hype. Jalen Hyatt, you saw exactly why the Giants got him. Deep threat, can get open deep, but he also has a tendency for a little bit of sloppy drops. But with the surroundings that they have right now at the position, why not Jalen Hyatt? He's a guy that we talked about Quentin Johnson before. Not a guy that I was high on coming out of the draft, but both landed in. You could not ask for better spots, for both of them. So they're the two guys that probably stand out. Love what Sean Tucker did. He's a guy I really liked coming out of college. Had the medicals that kind of pushed him down a little bit more, but he should be the running back too in Tampa Bay. Who were the other two guys you mentioned? Javonte Williams. We'll talk about him.
Yeah.
Javonte Williams, he's a guy that I've come on here and said I'm not drafting. I will have 0% shares of him. And it's just hard for me to get back on board right now. It might be a bullet that I take, but it's hard because he's going to get pushed up even more. I'd be surprised if he doesn't go in the 5th round tonight. He's not going to be a 8th, 9th round draft pick that he was going. He's going to keep getting moved up. So it's just a stand I have to take and keep going. Will I mix him into a spot if it makes sense? Of course, with the right build, but he's going to start getting expensive, and I'm still not 100%, all in on him.
Yeah, I mean, back to Waller, he goes at the 307 today. His ADP the last roughly week has been the 401, but you're just seeing it steadily creep up. Just the last couple of days, he's moved up to an average draft position, 35th overall. The week prior, it was roughly 42nd. So about 7 days in just the movement. And I think for a guy like you, Terp, it's there's some players, and Waller Fitzpatrick is like, yeah, this is what I've been saying for months almost. It's just now finally people are kind of it's hitting them, and sometimes
you're starting to see it. And once the preseason, the thing I always say is guys that you really like, you don't want them to do much in the preseason.
I mean, we're nearly there.
You don't want them to flash too much because then everybody starts seeing what you've been seeing, and what you thought, your projections were. And it's kind of putting you in a little bit of like, all right, I have to reach for this guy a little bit more and take him over guys that I kind of like too, when he was pretty much in a sweet spot for a while when we were getting him in these early streams in the 5th round. I think there was a couple 6th round Darren Wallers too. And that's just hard to push him all the way up to the 3rd round.
Sorry for cutting you off there. I was just about to say, we nearly saw it tonight. Waller come Vegas drafts, which are only a couple of weeks. Is he consistently tight end 3 in these main event, even Fantasy Pros drafts? Does he pass Hawkinson? Or
I think it's close. I think it's like,
or just going to depend.
50-50. I mean, I think it's going to be right around pretty much where he's going now. I mean, it all just comes down to the room. I mean, certain guys, it all just comes down to their love of a certain player. I mean, it's pretty hard not to buy into the hype of Darren Waller right now, looking at everything. I mean, obviously there's some negatives with his health and the uncertainty with Daniel Jones. A lot of people don't think he's a good quarterback, but I trust Brian Dable. Brian Dable is going to make somebody besides Saquon Barkley and Darren Waller. I think there's going to be 3 guys on that team that's going to be fantasy relevant. The question is who's the third, because the top 2 are pretty set in stone for me, Barkley and Darren Waller. Who's that receiver that's going to be a late round pick that's going to be a league winner type of situation? Right now, I mean, if you had a gun to my head, I think it's Jalen Hyatt. Where did that come from? Jalen Hyatt. I think he's the guy that I would bank on more than any of them, just because he just possesses that speed and that deep playability. Is it something that's going to be consistent early in the season? Probably not. But Hodges and Campbell and all these other guys, Sterling Shepard, they're not guys that really excite me too much that I'm going to go out of my way and draft. I'll take the upside with Hyatt because he's very, very, very cheap in draft still. He's moving up, but he's still cheap. So that's where I stand with the Giants.
The name I didn't mention when I was reciting those players just off the top of my head who have kind of been getting a lot of buzz that I asked you about, Jalen Warren was another one who I'm sure will cover. Najee Harris goes at the 405, but I mean,
just don't understand that at all. I mean, I don't. Jalen Warren is my second highest owned running back right now, and he's pushed. By the time we get to Vegas, he's probably going to pass Antonio Gibson just because, to me, he has a little bit more certainty than Antonio Gibson right now. I love Antonio Gibson this year, but I just feel like Jalen Warren could easily take that job from day one.
It feels like a Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott.
It does.
A lot of people
we all know who's better, and it's Jalen Warren. I mean, all these Najee Harris stands, I get it. It seems like it makes so much sense with the new offensive line, being better, Darnell Washington being there. It makes sense, but I mean, I don't know how you watch Jalen Warren and not think he's not the better running back. That's been my stance since day one. I don't have Najee Harris is a guy that I just continue to pass in drafts. If it bites me, it bites me, but I'm just sticking with my eyes, and my eyes tell me Jalen Warren's a better player.
Yeah, Najee Harris is kind of steadily been dropping. I can try and get the fall. Terp, the only thing quarterback related that would have made this me comfortable saying that, these people knew that you were commentating live on their draft was if Justin Herbert kind of went, because Josh Allen is the fourth QB off the board at the 312. Got to feel good value for Team 12 there, but you've kind of been lower on Josh, not even lower on Josh Allen. You just have more names than I would say most people do ahead of Josh Allen. But in this draft, kind of Jalen Hurts and Mahomes, Lamar goes, and then Josh Allen. Kind of what's your reasoning? Is there any reasoning beyond just, I think you have four names ahead of Josh Allen are going to be better? Or is there something about Josh Allen that concerns you for this year?
I mean, it's not that anything concerns me about him. It's just I like a couple guys better. Like I think obviously the top two are Hurts and Mahomes. In most people's eyes, Mahomes isn't number two in my eyes. But then you have the Herbert, Jackson, Joe Burrow, Justin Fields. You can put in there. They're all very similar when it comes to after. To me, it's Jalen Hurts, and then there's a tier break. Not that I'm a homer because I know I'm an Eagles fan, but I just feel like he's only going to get better this year. The rushing ability is not going anywhere. The team's going to be in more competitive games, so that means more fantasy points for Hurts. But after that, I mean, Josh Allen, I feel like I don't know how Team 8 does not take him. He falls all the way down to you. I know, stacking is something that's been talked about a lot in the last couple of weeks about being overrated, but Joe Mixon or Josh Allen, like, it's just, I don't know. Everybody's putting up their own money, so I can't criticize them too much, but that just seems like a layup to me. But Josh Allen falling all the way down to Team 12 is great value. I mean, he still has the rushing ability. James Cook is an emerge, and he's a hot name in fantasy football right now, but Josh Allen's still getting a lot of the goal line work. Diggs ain't going anywhere. Gabe Davis, is a guy that I like this year. I think could, take the next step, after last year's, complete disaster. I don't know. I think any of these I think this is the year where you push up quarterbacks a little bit more. After these like 7 or 8 guys that are clearly the top, then there's a little bit of a tier break. But Josh Allen should not be falling as far as he did in this draft.
I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, as I was probably 13, 14 when this was happening. But it is interesting how fantasy football goes in cycles, how for the first time in a while, it feels as though kind of these elite quarterbacks are getting largely pushed up into the late seconds, early thirds. And we kind of saw that, I'm sure, at some point with the Peyton, Drew Brees, Brady kind of in their prime, those early 2010s. I'm sure that was the same in these formats. And then it kind of reverted as there was analytics. You can get your quarterback later, but then the quarterbacks are again separating themselves. And it's kind of we're right back there where these elite quarterbacks is Burrow and Herbert go off the board both in short unison in this fifth round. I wanted to ask you a question about running backs, as you mentioned Joe Mixon. And just in terms of, we've kind of talked about these names that aren't sexy, and we thought Joe Mixon, he struggled last year, admittedly. Who knows how much of that was injury related, how much of that is just kind of age wearing down. But I also want to kind of bring up Alexander Madison. We've talked about James Conner in some of these backfields where, especially in some of these teams where there's possibly elite offenses, Cincinnati, Vikings were great last year. do we at least have to consider the fact that they don't really have much competition? I know in Cincinnati, Chris Evans has kind of had a revival, and people have talked up Dwayne McBride or Ty Chandler in Minnesota. But I think Dan Williamson was saying on our Superflex draft is a big Vikings fan is that Chandler and McBride haven't been great in practices games. At what point, essentially, is my point for Mixon, Madison to be considered is they might not have that much competition on a great offense. At some point, it's just even though it's not the sexiest pick, that these guys have value just by product of the situation they're in.
For two guys that I'm not on, it's definitely a worry because Madison has been banged up. Ty Chandler has not emerged. Nobody behind Ty Chandler has emerged. They have not added anybody. And that's a worry because, I'm not an Alexander Madison guy. I really don't think he's that good. But he's comfortable in the offense. He's a guy that it seems like they trust. So, to be a heavy fade like I am on him, it's definitely a little bit of a worry because with none of these, younger players taking the job that, when he's been out, fully fading him, could put yourself in a hurt because, most of the time he's not going early fifth that he went here. But, when you're staring at him compared to some of the other guys that are on the board, he does seem like the guy that should be getting all the work. Does that mean he's going to be a value? The question's out there, but he's definitely a worry. Same thing with Joe Mixon. He's a guy that, is in one of the best offenses in football with nobody behind him. Chase Brown, he's kind of fading a little bit. Chris Evans, he had the hype starting back up with him like it was, last year. But I don't really believe that, Chris Evans is going to be a guy that if something happens to Mixon, I still, say it again, I still think Leonard Fournette is the guy that should be going there. And if it's not, it should be some sort of move for CEH to get your boy from the Chiefs. I just feel like that makes too much sense, being familiar with Burrow. I'm not sitting here saying these guys are world beaters. Obviously, I like Fournette more, but I don't know. Joe Mixon's not a guy that, compared to some of the guys that are in the range of him, I don't know. They're both worries. Everything you said correct. They're both worries because there's nobody behind him that seems like they want that job. So if you're just looking at just opportunity, they both have probably two of the best out there.
Fifth round here, Kittle, Pitts, Goddard, three of them go in a span of 4 picks. Of those three, which are you most comfortable drafting this year?
It's probably Goddard. I mean, I like George Kittle, but I don't know. Someone bad. He's always injured. He's always banged up. I mean, Brock Purdy, came back last night and looked good. It seems like he's fully back, which is a very big surprise to me. I didn't think he'd be ready for the season. And it seems like, he's going to be a day one guy, for a team that is fighting in the NFC behind the Eagles to take that crown. Kittle definitely gives you the most upside, but he's got to be out there. And he's banged up already in camp. He always seems like he has a nagging injury. It's just, a little bit of an annoyance for fantasy owners. So that's definitely a worry. Kyle Pitts, we've talked about that. I'm just out on him this year. I don't trust the coach. We saw the personnel they used in the preseason game, and I don't like that at all. I mean, I know he's, a little, hurt. So maybe the coaching staff just doesn't want to put him, put too much on him. But Kyle Pitts is somebody else can draft him. And Goddard behind A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith, he's the guy, and there's nobody else. So is Goddard a league-winning tight end? I don't think so, but he's a guy that he can consistently put in there and not really worry about. I just want to say something about the chat. One of the guys said something about the guy on the right said something about Davante Adams last year. That was me, 100%, not hiding from it. Did not like Davante Adams last year. Definitely was wrong about that. First to admit it, you were right.
Hey, Terp. I mean, the people are coming to see the footage and hear us just talk shop. I mean, last year was not both of our finest, but hey, I mean, Terp did put his money where the mouth is. Was in the best ball finals. So I mean, yeah,
it was. I'm not going to sit here and say it was an outstanding year overall. I've had much better years, overall with player takes and just like weird calls. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But Davante Adams was not a guy that I was on this year. And guess what? Not on him this year either. So we'll see if it works out.
Yeah, I mean, on these live coverages, we won't run from anything. Terp was not on Davante last year. He won't.
I will
be
not
on
hide from my moronic takes. There's going to be some of them on here, but that's what makes it fun because you can always come back and say that idiot on the right didn't like a player, and I'll be the first to raise my hand and be like, "Yep, that's me."
To Davante, I mean, it's a weird spot. I mean, I said we can go back to Davante. Would you like to elaborate? I don't think we talked about him a ton. Why aren't you on him again this year? Because
I still think he's happy there. I mean, I just don't think he's a guy that is going to want to be part of a pretty much a rebuild, because Jimmy G, he's a good NFL quarterback, but that's all he is. He's not a guy that, is going to pepper, in my opinion, Davante Adams with targets. I should have, been more on the, train last year with, the narrative with the college and all that yippity yap with Carr and Adams. I should have seen that more for what it was. I didn't. I missed it. I was totally wrong there, but I don't think I'm going to be wrong this year. I just think the Raiders are going to be very, very bad. And Davante Adams is going to be very, very disinterested in playing. I just can't see him going out there and just grinding all those years in Green Bay when they were a productive team and, a team that was in the playoffs fighting for a Super Bowl. Now they're just fighting to not be in last place in the division. So I don't know. I just don't think his ceiling is as high as some of these other guys like Garrett Wilson, that are A.J. Brown, that obviously getting drafted around them.
Just wait till Aiden O'Connell is starting, and then your Warriors.
You just like the name, but he does look good.
What are the if you had to give a percentage odds of Davante Adams shooting up for the Jets at some point this year, what would you put it at?
I just don't think the contract thing can happen. I mean,
I don't think it can either, but it's just like it's a classic Twitter rumor that people love running with.
It would be wild, because if the Jets are in the running at the trade deadline and there's a way that it could happen, Aaron Rodgers, if he's playing a year, maybe 2 years, he don't give a crap about the future of the Jets. He wants to win now. He wants to win a Super Bowl, shove it up Green Bay's what. So if there's a possibility and the money can work, but I know there's a pretty big dead cap hit for the Raiders. So I don't see that happening. But if it does, it's the Jets. I'd probably say 20% chance it gets traded.
The Jets are, I'm sure, somehow helped out, though, that Rodgers is taking such pay cuts and deferring so much money, which is going to hit down the line. But for these current years, who knows?
My guess is Rodgers is setting something up for the possibility to get him back in there. But it seems like it's so hard to figure out. But weirder things have happened in the NFL. We've seen weirder trades. If things go haywire real quick for the Raiders, anything's possible, but I don't think it's likely.
Yeah, Jake Vanetti in the chat, he's asking if Adams does get traded, where does he go? The Jets feel like a possibility.
To me, it's Jets or nothing.
But what's exciting about the NFL trade deadline is the more and more in the past couple of years, it's become more and more exciting. It used to just be kind of a day on the calendar, maybe a couple of minor trades. You're starting to see blockbusters. It's getting kind of like MLB, NBA, where NFL trade deadline days, teams are more than willing to do that in the middle of the season. So, I mean, obviously last year, McCaffrey did get moved. You've seen it in past years. So it wouldn't shock me if there's a team like the Raiders with that as an asset trying to make it work. But as you said, the contract logistics are something that I am not well versed on to see what teams can make it work.
I'm pretty sure it's an ugly hit for the Raiders, so I don't think it's possible. But like I said, weird things have happened, and I'm sure there's some backroom deals that they can figure out.
So Tuck, we said we kind of talk about him later on. He's been drafted. Javonte Williams goes at the 607. You and me have been, if you go back to some of our first shows, talk about just bad takes that we've had, let alone both of us. I mean, just regardless of how he performs this year, just the Javonte Williams, why are you drafting him? He literally has one knee. He has two functioning knees. I can confirm that at minimum. I know you were saying earlier, you're going to kind of get it. You missed the discount period, which really hurts, but I can't say I'm in on him, but it's just there is an intriguing possibility. You've been vocal that you think the Broncos offense rebounds in some format under Sean Payton. Better, I mean, it's a low bar to clear, but they will clear it. And we've seen Sean Payton running backs throughout his time have been really successful. And if you're not a believer in Samaje Perine, which there really isn't that much to back it up besides being kind of a change of pace back, in my opinion, regardless of the opportunity. Just give me your thoughts on where you're at with Javonte Williams, if you could dive a little deeper into it. I know you're probably still not super heavy on him, and there are still concerns about how long it can take him to truly ramp up. But I don't know. By the end of it, by like kind of mid-year, I think we might be looking at a Javonte Williams that we've kind of come to know, which I could not have predicted in even June, July.
It's really hard to not be surprised and excited and all this stuff when it comes to Javonte Williams right now, because people like me, and you and a lot of other guys who are very well known in the business, in the high stakes injury and fantasy football podcast, whatever. Not many people thought Javonte Williams would be back. So not many people drafted him, even at the value when he pretty much was free, because most people all believe that. And they really didn't think Javonte Williams was going to be a guy that would be able to contribute and be a 6th round pick on August 20th. I would say you're crazy, but look where we are at right now. He looked good in the game last night. They added nobody. So, P. Ryan is what P. Ryan is. I think he's still a serviceable, solid fantasy pick this year. I don't think he's terrible in any way. It just comes down to, can Javonte Williams' knee hold up? At this point, I have to stick to what I said at the beginning. He's not a guy I'll be adding a ton of. At the right value, which he won't be, because there's only going to be one guy who likes him more, I can't take him in the 6th round. I mean, if you're asking me, can I take him over Rashad White, James Cook, J.K. Dobbins? I can't. Does that mean he won't bite me? It's definitely a worry that I have. I'm not going to sit here and say I don't. He did look good last night, but a couple carries, a couple catches. Let's see how when the wear and tear of the actual season starts, if the knee's going to hold up. That's something that worries me. So when it comes to Javonte Williams, I just can't take him in the 6th round when all these other guys are taking him in the 9th, 8th round. If I had one main event team, that'd be different. If I had one Fantasy Pros team, that'd be different. I probably would, from what I saw, be okay with taking him where he's getting taken now. But, with multiple entries in all the contests, I'll have maybe one, but that's probably it.
He's been going at the 6:05 in the main event the last 5 days. The earliest he's gone, someone took him at the 5:01. The latest, there's still been a 7:03. But you're looking at, I know we did some best balls and fantasy pros multiple months ago, kind of when we really kicked off our draft coverage. And we saw some Javonte. I'm pretty sure it was like 9th, 10th, maybe. I could be exaggerating, but for sure we got Javonte was going kind of 8th, 9th. Even then, so and possibly later. So he's obviously risen dramatically as more and more positive news is coming out of that camp. Terp, I kind of want to direct you to kind of let's talk about the Steelers as a whole. We're going to kind of cover Jalen Warren, I'm sure, in some more detail. Naji, we kind of already touched on it, but the Steelers offense in a whole has been one of the best performers in the preseason. We've talked about there's certain things you can take from the preseason, but you can't base entire draft strategy or moving a player up based on it. But are you buying kind of the Steelers offense? Matt Canada's still there, but they have looked firing on every cylinder. Kenny Pickett's been great. Pickett's has had some great catches. Deontay's getting peppered with targets. We obviously talked about Jalen Warren. Offensive line looks improved. Just kind of Freiermuth caught a touch, and I could go on. It's just only really positives, unless you're maybe Najee Harris's fantasy value. But what are your thoughts on that Steelers offense? Are you buying it into the improvements?
Probably the most improved team, probably the most impressive team of the preseason so far. I mean, Kenny Pickett looks very, very good. Will that transition to the regular season and probably the toughest division of football? I think it will. I mean, it's hard to really predict that division. That's not one I would want to sit here and say right now who's winning the division. All 4 teams have a case, in my opinion. I think that the Steelers are probably the 4th best team. That doesn't mean anything. If Kenny Pickett takes that next step, they have the weapons and the dogs on that offense. Obviously an improved offensive line. Defense is going to be serviceable. Mike Tomlin's the best coach in that division. It comes down to, do you believe in Kenny Pickett? And I do. George Pickens continues to looks like he's improving. Davante Johnson is one of the most consistent guys in the NFL, so I don't worry about him. Allen Robinson playing on all passing downs last night. That's definitely something you got to watch if you're drafting late. We all hate that name and we hate that guy from what he did to us last year, but it's something to watch if something goes happening to one of them top 2 guys. Freiermuth looks like he's gelling with Pickett. That was a nice catch last night. When he caught that touchdown, it's hard not to like what you see from the Steelers right now. Kenny Pickett's a guy that I've targeted a lot in best ball as a backup, and as of right now, before the season start, it looks like things are going well. A lot of things can happen though. That division is by not even close, in my opinion, the hardest division of football. So we'll see.
If Allen Robinson puts together a productive season kind of out of nowhere with Pittsburgh, I'm going to fully turn on Matt Stafford and Sean McVay, and they will.
What if this is the year from Allen Robinson and CEH? Like, what are you going to do next year?
I wouldn't show my face on these streams. I
mean,
can't say that because I will be showing my face on these streams.
Extremely. That would be like me with Alan Lazard. I mean, if Alan Lazard goes out there and is a top 10 fantasy receiver, like I don't know how you come back from that. Adam Thielen. I mean, there's plenty of guys that I just pretty much called trash on this show, but I don't think I'm going to be wrong on either of those two.
Yeah, I refuse to believe from what I saw with Allen Robinson that he has, but it's by all accounts he will be kind of
weirder things have happened in fantasy football. We've seen some weirdos over the year that pretty much guys have written. Josh Jacobs last year, he played
random revivals.
Games. Yep, like literally everybody wrote him off. People thought he was going to get cut. He might not make the team, and now
look at Geno. Look at Geno as a what?
Geno was a laughing stock of football.
Top
forever.
6 QB.
Top 6 QB. Now. Getting totally disrespected in drafts, but is he really getting disrespected? Is with those 3 receivers, like there's not any better 3 receiving, combos in football. So Geno is we haven't really talked about him much, but with Metcalf, JSN looks real good. And Tyler Lockett, we know we're getting out of him. So we'll see on Geno this year.
There is something to be said. I see multiple tweets about it. And it is true. This is not my analysis by any means. I forget who tweeted, but it's true is that, and I mentioned at the start of the show, rookies are going to get more buzz in preseason because they're going to be used more. The coaches are trying to get them game action, see how they do, right? Versus veterans who are more known commodities. But man, does JSN look good. Those Seahawks receivers. DK's went a little earlier than he normally does in today's draft, but he's been pretty steady and Lockett's been pretty steady, but JSN has rocketed up draft boards, which I remember saying at the very start, I was surprised he was low. And I think it was just more of concerns with the number of receivers who were on the team already, but he's about going where I kind of thought he should have been kind of from the start. There's a lot of names, but I kind of wanted to talk to you about a guy we've been very vocal on the show with Theo Greminger. Eric Balkman's been pretty open about it. We give Jahmyr Gibbs. Just wait till the Jahmyr Gibbs rise starts happening. And for a minute, maybe I would say about 3 weeks ago, we thought we were getting it. You started seeing him early third.
I don't know what's happening. I'm surprised he's not going higher. What else do you want to see?
You and me have discussed this, so I don't want to get too into it to kind of rehash it. But still, it's 3-11 now. I kind of wanted to talk to you then. People have made good points because I think we did this either last week or our first main event coverage. And you had said you don't necessarily agree with it, but you understand the other side. People are making great points in the chat on David Montgomery, but David Montgomery's staying steady. Personally, I just don't see the value with him because I'm such a believer and maybe blinded by my belief in Jahmyr Gibbs. But I just refuse to believe a guy who's gone in the top 12 of the draft. And if you look at the running backs who are taken in that top 15 in fantasy, they all finish like as a top 10 running back just because the usage that they're going to get, the belief that the coaching staff has in them. David Montgomery, I want to kind of turn it to, has remained steady in this kind of 7th round. Are you going to have any shares in Montgomery? Is it or like because David Montgomery, I don't think it's true. He's not an awful running back, but where are you at on David Montgomery as this Jahmyr Gibbs rise doesn't happen?
I've still got plenty of shares of David Montgomery. He's a guy that I like very much. I mean, I feel like he's just a much better Jamal Williams. And we know what Dan Campbell's going to do. He's not like as much as we love Jahmyr Gibbs. David Montgomery is going to be a very, very, very good 7th round pick. And I hated David Montgomery the last couple of years. Never drafted him, never considered drafting him, hated the system he was in, just didn't fit. But with this offense, with this ugliness that Dan Campbell likes to bring around sometimes, David Montgomery is going to get plenty of work. And it's going to be, it's going to be an annoyance to Jahmyr Gibbs in some cases. It's going to be an annoyance to St. Brown, but David Montgomery is a guy that in the 7th round, if you're looking for an RB2 or, in certain builds or RB3, I think he's a very, very good, potentially, high upside guy because the only fear of Jahmyr Gibbs to me is his size. So if he gets banged up or gets hurt, you're talking about a potential league winner. That's just disgusting to say with David Montgomery in the 7th round. So he's a guy that I will have plenty of. I have no negative things to say about him. I said he was going to finish higher than Jahmyr Gibbs the first stream I think we did. I've backed off that since because I just have so much Jahmyr Gibbs right now. and I just love the way they're using him, and it seems like everything just seems perfect. But David Montgomery will be – I would take David Montgomery over Miles Sanders. I would take David Montgomery over Dalvin Cook in a second.
Can they both return the value of their current ADPs? Is that possible?
I believe they can. We talk about the Vegas drafts and all the drafts after the game. I'm picking 6th in my main event live in Vegas after the tournament, after the game starts. I am hoping for a 60-53 game. Give me all those guys, just the 3 guys in particular, because they're the guys I think can move. Obviously Kelsey, but he's going to be going before me no matter what. St. Brown, monster stats, and Jahmyr Gibbs. Because both of the ladders, they help me a ton in my other spots. So get them up there in the top 3 and let some of these other guys fall to me at 6, and I'll be doing backflips up and down playing Hollywood.
I was waiting for you to say, like, oh, I want a 35-31 game or something.
Nah,
like a
60-53 sounds better. Just no defense, just up and down,
it's
up
not
and
gonna
down.
happen.
You say that, but
ridiculous.
I just don't want to.
What is this? Rams Chiefs from Monday Night Football 4 years ago.
Possible.
That's still probably the best football game besides Eagles Patriots I've ever seen. Like, as just a neutral observer.
100%.
And Eagles Patriots, because it was the Super Bowl, has to get a little bit of it. Honestly, the Eagles Chiefs, not trying to rub it in here, was also just a phenomenal game to watch, like as a fan. Except it was kind of ruined at the end by the holding penalty. But
thanks for the reminder.
If you're going to bring up Clyde Edwards-Helaire every scrim, I got to do what I got to do.
You had to bring that up. There's plenty of other things you could bring up except that.
I could bring up
Henry Muto. I remember that. I remember that. Yeah, I still go back to last week when we got trolled about CEH 2020. I don't forget things.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about it, I'm pretty sure, every stream it comes up, because it is a fascinating component of these high-stakes contests that we run here at the FFPC, and that it is that the drafts after the Thursday night game, people who haven't maybe drafted with or don't draft after the Thursday night game, you've told me, and I've seen some, but not until you get there do you realize, like, wow, it really does get pushed up. Now, last year,
didn't do much.
There was some, though, but like for me, they're a little way like the Allen Robinson.
Diggs got moved up.
Got moved up. You saw a little Allison, but Robinson was a big one. And then the whole Cam Akers and Darrell Henderson was like, that was the biggest movement, I'd say, out of anything. Robinson got pushed down, but Henderson and Akers nosedived.
Here's a serious question for you. You obviously were out there last year. I'm really curious to your answer here because I think it's way lower than people think. Out of 100%, how many people that draft in, let's just say, the main event or the Fantasy Pros Championship, how many people do you think know about the free look?
I was
thinking about this all week, and I was like, my guess
I tried to advertise it like a lot because
100%. And when I see it all the time, I'm just curious what people actually think. Like that, I'm not just saying. Obviously, you know the obvious. You know the Kelseys, the St. Browns, the Gibbs, the Sky Moores, the Mahomes, the Goffs, that kind of thing. But like, how many people don't know that like you can put Marvin Jones in the starting lineup, and if Marvin Jones gets a 0, you just take him right out? I think it's less than 50%.
I mean, when you consider the sheer number of entries per contest, and I mean, I guess some of them are, a lot of people have multiple entries. I hope it's more than 50 because the amount of work I'm doing, well, specifically this year to try and advertise it. And when we're kind of sending out the promotional emails, it will be highlighted there, the videos. But yeah, it's definitely.
You go through the team. You got Richie James, you got Justin Ross, you got MVS. Not these guys all probably get drafted, depending on how it shapes out the position. But look at all the running backs in KC. So many guys that like you could literally put in your lineup, and people just don't do it. And most of the time, it doesn't really burn anybody. But I'm sure over the years, you just sit there and you look back and you're like, that Jared Goff 30-point game against Kansas City would look much better than me starting Anthony Richardson week 1.
No, I don't. It's a
good question. Here's another question. How many people do you think enter the Fantasy Pros Championship and the main event that don't know that the FFPC drafts after the Thursday night game?
That has to be way higher because you see it listed when you're signing
up. But if they
up.
don't like the, but if they don't, but that don't mean they look.
Yeah, that is true. I would hope. I mean, yeah, you're putting me on the spot. I think that one is way higher. I think people.
I think it's a question that like.
I think it's also
way
people
lower
are
than
pretty.
You think.
Maybe, but there's also I do think there's somebody said there's a lot of people publicize their drafts after the Thursday game, so I think you see it a lot. And like when you log in, you're kind of seeing that.
And I don't think you're wrong with that take, but I also think that people look at it as like, all right, my last draft is Tuesday, September, whatever it is, 4th or 3rd. You know, all these guys are they're just talking about drafts they already drafted. They're actually drafting after the season. The only people that probably really know about those drafts are like really, you know, guys who look into it, who are looking to draft super late and like, oh wow, I can draft after that game. How does that work? Or most people are like, I'm scared to draft after that game because I don't know how it works. It's definitely something that I think is more tricky than most people think.
Yeah, I mean, the chat is popping off about this. I've just been reading their comments, so sorry for getting a little distracted. Jalen Warren goes at the 9-12. No, I mean, it's there's definitely elements and doing kind of the marketing. I've been trying to better publicize the ways we can, but sometimes, I mean, it's a fact about anything in life. This is the last thing I'll say about it. It's kind of a fact about anything in life is that actually read the rules that you're going into, because you'll find, and that's, I'm sure the first thing is that there's little ways to kind of exploit it later in draft, taking dart throws, because that with the free look, for example, and drafts after the Thursday night, just kind of see all your options. But let's get back to the draft at hand. Turp, I wanted to go back actually to the 8th round. We got a little bit in a good way sidetracked because it was honestly good that we should be mentioning the free look and discussing it, so those watching have a good understanding of it. But Deshaun Watson in the 8th round, training or camp reports that I've been seeing haven't necessarily not that he's been issued, but just he's under pressure every time. He's running for his life. Brown's offense it doesn't seem as it's going great. So where are you at with Deshaun Watson? 8th round, it's not, again, he's dropped a bit, but again, he wasn't putting all this aside, the negative buzz this training camp. I know he would miss a lot, but he was bad last year too. So is there any concerns with that Browns offense and Deshaun Watson?
I just added him twice in the 7th, which was a little bit of a push. And then I drafted him with Austin Martin in the 9th. We got him, which to me is a great spot. So it just comes down to, like I said, that tier break after Trevor Lawrence is massive, in my opinion. It comes down to Deshaun Watson. I believe in the Browns this year, but it's still a worry because they were just with the Eagles. And you just saw a lot of OTAs and, when they have their scrimmages and everything, and he didn't look great. He did not, jump off the page when I was reading some of the reports from the beat writers. They have plenty of weapons. Obviously, Nick Chubb's there, monster. It just comes down to, is he still like locked in? Is he ready to regain his top-notch form? I think he is, but that division is not going to give him much wiggle room. They could easily be in a hole early that they can't get out of. So I like Deshaun Watson. I think I have him on 3 out of my portfolio so far. Basketball teams. He was on the first stream that we drafted. I took him.
Yeah.
So I like him, but there's obviously some worry, because if you don't get one of those top 7 guys, you're playing a little bit of Russian roulette when it comes to some of these guys with Watson, Tua, Dak, Richardson, and so on and so on. I mean, it's a very difficult position if you miss out on one of the elite guys.
Another name. Talk about it. We've talked a lot this stream about names there's been a bunch of buzz about and just a bunch of hype about. Last year's ultimate buzz guy was Isaiah Pacheco, and this year, due to probably injury and the focus on these eclectic group of Chiefs receivers and who's going to lead them, there's been no discussion about Pacheco. I know he's banged up. He usually goes at the 7-11 in this format. He goes at the 806 today. He's in a little bit of a weird spot because he's a guy no one's talking about who performed well last year as a 7th round rookie. Balled out in the Super Bowl. I know he was banged up, but he really delivered on that hype, which very well we've seen over and over again is often unwarranted. But is Isaiah Pacheco in the 8th round kind of not, again, you can't call it a dart throw, a sleeper, kind of lottery ticket like we do for these later round. But at some point, I kind of look at it as, for all we hype up the Chiefs receivers and the value that they could possess if one of them becomes the guy. I know there's Jerick McKinnon. We talked about Deneric Prince, Clyde's still there, the Michael Pirine. Who knows if they could sign or trade for someone? Are we just kind of forgetting about Pacheco and kind of dismissing him too quickly? Or is this just like a fact of he might have been kind of a one-hit wonder?
It's hard to trust any of those guys, right now. I mean, I think Pacheco is probably the leader in the clubhouse, but I mean, Jerick McKinnon's still there, and I don't think he's going anywhere. I mean, like I've talked about him a bunch of times on these shows. I've never heard his name on any podcast, and I listen to pretty much every podcast that I can. It's something I think makes you better as a player, especially with some of the bright minds that are out there right now. Yeah. But nobody's talking about McKinnon, and he's still a guy that will be ignored a lot. I mean, I know where he's going. I know, people are saying he's too expensive, but are you drafting CEH? Do you believe that he's just going to be better than he's been the last couple of years? I mean, I like CEH at a cheap price, but I'm not going out of my way to get him. Pacheco has been hurt. Still not back out there. We're 3 weeks away from the season starting. You should be worried there. So Deneric Prince, his stardom is starting to fizzle a little bit. I still think it's a good spot for Leonard Fournette. But Pacheco out of the group is probably still the best because you saw they depended on him a lot last year. But if you're asking me, I'll still take McKinnon and just hope that realistically they're the same, as he was last year, and just gets me, 4 or 5 serviceable weeks.
Comment in the chat is essentially asking, couldn't you attribute maybe some of Watson's struggles and the team struggles to the Browns defense being really solid? The Browns defense is solid. I think that is a fair point, although you can correct me if I'm wrong. I have to look it up in chat. Please do. I believe the Browns did have joint practices with another team, and the reports still weren't glowing, but I could be wrong on that. Oh, yeah. Look at that. Speaking of the Eagles, Terp, I have almost put Rashad Penny on my do not draft list, not just because there's rumors he could get cut. The Gainwell love. Swift is more talented. I watched some of the Eagles' second week of the preseason. He didn't look great. Like, he looked slow.
Which is surprising to me because I believe the hype coming in, like he was going to be like, if he's healthy, he was going to be the guy, but he does not look good. Like watching that preseason game, even when he got past the initial defender, like he just looked like he was running in mud. I think he still survives the cut. I mean, along, Trey Sermon, it's going to come down to Trey Sermon versus Rashad Penny. And, neither of those two are guys I think you have to really worry about right now. Penny's the guy that I pretty much written off my draft board right now. It's Gainwell and Swift. I still think Swift's the guy. I think Gainwell is going to be plenty used. Boston Scott's going to be annoying. It's still a running back, room that I'm not crazy about. But if I had a guy to bet on, it'd be Swift. But Penny to me is, off my board.
He's getting into do not draft territory. Yeah,
he's getting close.
He's still going in the 10th
round. Another guy that I'll ask you about, which I haven't heard anything today because I've been out, but have we heard anything about my savior Devon Etienne?
I don't think we've heard anything. It's an AC joint injury was the rumor, like the Twitter doctors, and not like as in
that's
people
okay.
Trying to be
I'm
like
okay
the actual
nothing collarbone wise or.
Not to my knowledge. I believe people are theorizing it is an AC joint or a dislocation that they popped in.
It's a couple-week injury. He'll be back by the start, maybe, week 1. I mean, we all bet on the guy to be, a guy that's not going to start the season as the guy, but eventually will take over the job. Please be healthy. Please, nothing serious. I mean, I think if you survive week 2 of preseason, you're pretty safe when it comes to, like, preseason injuries, with these guys, but I don't know. I just wish I just heard some news that came out and said, hey, he's okay, or he's going to be out a couple of weeks. And I'm fine with that because he's definitely a guy that I'm very, 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 very highly exposed to that would be just a massive bummer if he was out a long period of
time. I just wanted to real quick before I kind of jump into that point, because I do want to give some thoughts on A-Chain. I saw Henry Meter in the chat was giving some thoughts on the FFPC format. Henry, don't you worry. One of my checklists for the offseason, look out for it in the first couple of weeks, is I will be kind of sending out a player survey. Any FFPC player, please, which you can give your suggestions, your thoughts. I'll be reading through all of those and seeing how we can.
And in that survey, say whatever you want. Don't just like answer the questions that are on the survey. Like there's always going to be a comment section in there where if you got to say something that's just off the wall or off crazy, I mean, nothing, just don't be afraid to just say what's on your mind. Like some people just are like, well, I'm just going to answer the questions yes, no, or, you know, basic stuff. But if you got something to say it. I mean, that doesn't mean it's going to get put into context or it's going to make it to the powers that be, but we're going to listen. And, you know, Aiden and all those guys are going to listen to everything you say and try to make the best situation.
Yeah. So did want to address that will be coming in the first couple of weeks of the NFL season. So be on the lookout for that. Should be probably an email form. Terp, I want to discuss with you kind of back on the Dolphins. Etienne obviously gets hurt. Some people are saying the comments right here is like, not sure why he was playing in the fourth quarter, and they're running him right down the middle. Not probably the best look, but he's banged up. He was always his knock, despite his blazing speed, was kind of his size, which could lead to a higher propensity of injury. Jeff Wilson, Raheem Mostert goes here in the 11:05. I don't believe Jeff Wilson's been drafted. You're high on Jeff Wilson. I don't think we talked about him in a while, but I kind of want to talk to you. What is your state if A-Chain is missing some time or is going to kind of get eased back into things, or if this injury kind of prevents him from maybe claiming the starter's role earlier? Are you on Mostert or Wilson at their current prices?
I lean Wilson. I think he's a better player. I mean, he's also banged up in camp, so that's something you got to watch. We still keep talking about the Leonard Fournette watch. I mean, he's a guy that if A-Chain's out longer than you expected, you know, is a guy that could fit here and probably fit really well. So it's definitely one to watch, but whoever the running back is in this offense, whether it's Mostert, Jeff Wilson, or somebody else that we don't see, A-Chain, I hope it is, but will be a very, very solid fantasy running back. And I think it's going to be Jeff Wilson, but Mostert's the guy that I got to start adding more because he's still cheap. And with the unknown with A-Chain right now, and just obviously early in the season, the unknown is going to be with him. He's just a guy that, you know, if you're punting running back or you're looking for that RB2, if you're going here a running back, he's a guy that I think you just have to add to your teams and try to get some serviceable weeks out of, you know, before this job gets a little, you know, uglier at the position when A-Chain hopefully comes back or takes the job at, you know, what most of us want. So both these guys have plenty of value. Both these guys are guys I want to draft, you know, in this little pocket of drafting that we're doing right now. They're not too expensive. They're not, you know, where you're, you know, 11th round Mostert, Jeff Wilson get drafted yet? No, not yet.
Not yet.
But they're guys that I feel like very good ads right now on an offense that should be, you know, if everybody's healthy, one of the best in football again.
Terp, I kind of want to talk about the tight ends, give them a little love. We haven't talked about any tight ends in a while. Dalton Kincaid goes at the 907. Talk about, I mean, his usage and the personnel they were using him looked phenomenal. I was saying a lot of two tight end sets, and the hope is essentially, and I read a lot on it, is the Bills know they need another weapon. The receiver class, maybe they didn't love. So they move up and just are going to use Dalton Kincaid as a receiver. That's kind of what they've looked to be doing in the preseason. Juwan Johnson, his steam is going to start going up. I think he hits single-digit rounds in a couple of weeks. The more and more Carr talks him up, and we saw what Carr and Waller, the
tight ends are starting to move. Tight ends are starting. These guys who are dipping and diving at the end of drafts, the Luke Musgraves, the Juwan Johnsons, they're starting to move up drafts, and they're starting to get to the point where you got to make a decision on them versus guys who are very, very, very good players, you know, at other positions, whether it's quarterback, wide receiver, or you know, these backup handcuff running backs. So they're all these names are one to watch.
I mean, Luke Musgrave, I would say, Terp, you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's probably the name who's moved up the most in the past 2 weeks, without a doubt.
Kincaid, I'm surprised hasn't moved up more. I know people are scared of the rookie, you know, tight end and all that stuff, but he's looked like it looks like Josh Allen's trying to get in the ball. They look like they're doing things for Dalton Kincaid. It's hard to not be excited about what you see there. Obviously, the questions with Dawson Knox still there. Him being a rookie, you know, Diggs is there. Is there enough balls to go around? But he's extremely talented. Both those rookie receivers or rookie tight ends are extremely talented. So it's hard not to like what that team has done at the tight end position with Kincaid and Musgrave.
I mean, Turp, I do think there's something to be said. I don't really want to. I am going to just straight up pat the FFPC and specifically our players on the back. Part of it also we've talked about a lot of guys. Oh, we were expecting a bigger rise. Is a lot of time our players are the best of the best, and that's the truth. And especially in the main event, it's the guys who really are truly putting their money where their mouth is and really investing and know their stuff about fantasy football. So a lot of their ADPs are kind of set and they don't move a ton because from the get-go, they're kind of being drafted in the right spot. And a lot of the biggest rises are names who kind of go from the last couple of rounds and then fly up based on Luke Musgrave goes to the 1206, who you kind of are guys maybe a little more unknown quantities or no expectations. And then preseason kind of reveals a way bigger role. But the guys kind of like Jahmyr Gibbs, among others we've talked about, they kind of get drafted and they don't move a ton too much because oftentimes they get drafted from the get-go in the right spot, and then you see more gradual rises as time goes on rather than these massive reactions that you see in other maybe smaller sites because our players they're not reactionary to preseason. I think that's an interesting point that people need to consider. Turp, I kind of wanted to bring your attention to somebody who may disappoint you, but Tank Bigsby, another guy who looked good in the preseason. And this is where I do go back is there's only so much you can take from the preseason because we've seen it before. I was thinking back to preseason MVP Amir Abdullah from nearly a decade ago was for the Lions, was a beast. I'm sure he was skyrocketing up boards. We've seen it before, but it's more so factoring in what we know about Doug Peterson. Doug Peterson wants a committee. They invested third-round capital in Tank Bigsby. He's going to have a role. And how much does that impact your love for Travis Etienne that you have this year?
I very much like Travis Etienne this year. We know that from last year. Love the player, love the situation. But full transparency, I don't have a ton of Travis Etienne this year. It's not because I don't like him. It's just because I like some of the other guys around him. And I just feel like certain drafts that I've been in, at least, he hasn't fallen at all. He's going in the third round, early fourth, and compared to some of the other guys that we've known that I like in that range, I just don't see myself adding him a bunch, based off builds and things like that. That does not mean I don't like him. But Tank Bigsby, he's getting so much hype in preseason. People were saying he's the best running back there. He's going to steal the job week 1 and all that stuff. And let's another full transparency. I have plenty of Tanks Bigsby, plenty of teams that I drafted him on, but pump the brakes. Rookie running backs, I'm not getting too crazy with that. This is a team that is ready to win a Super Bowl. They have one of the best offenses in place. Let's see if Tank Bigsby can pick up the blitz. Let's see if he can pass block. Let's see if he can, when he's getting, the ground and pound that the NFL puts out there, let's see if he can hold up. I still think Travis Etienne's the guy. He's a guy that I hope this Bigsby stuff keeps going crazy and Etienne falls to the 5th round some drafts. But in drafts that I've been in, as much as I like him, he's just not falling. He's been, I've had the early 3rd, middle 3rd. I just keep missing him. So Etienne, still love him. Bigsby, like him, but pump the brakes a little bit because Bigsby's going to get to like a point where he could be getting into single-digit rounds, and that's a little uncomfortable for me.
Famous Jay in the chat's asking if there are free agency deadlines for the FFPC. Just want to address those. Essentially, it's, again, $1,000 of free agent budget that you get each season, and there are 2 weekly deadlines. It's Wednesday and Sunday. You have to get your bids in by Wednesday, 10 p.m. Eastern time, and Sunday, 10 a.m. Eastern time.
I got another question for you. Here's another question for you.
Okay.
Percentage. How many people do you think
I don't like these percentages questions.
How many people do you think that know that there's a waiver before the season in these contests? Fantasy pros. How many people do you think know that you can pick up free agents before season starts?
Like, it just goes back to how much do people,
I think the number's low too.
It might be low because that is something that is heavily publicized. That first waiver
that is everywhere. That's everywhere. It's on Twitter. You get emails on it. You get all that stuff.
So in that respect, I think it's kind of in some ways hard to avoid. Like, you have to be really not paying attention, which I'm sure happens. People are busy there. Who knows? But
also, I think a lot of guys like draft my team. Like, I'm not just going to cut guys now unless there's a major, like somebody tears their ACL or something like that.
The thing though is people who draft early, the names that slowly rise, the Luke Musgraves who were going undrafted, those guys are going to be itching to get to that first waiver deadline, and people are already looking, when can I pick them up? And those are always really interesting to see. Already can't wait. I don't know if he's watching today. He sometimes is in the chat. That first Mojo tweet where he kind of dissects that first waiver run before the season starts. Always exciting to see what people bid.
Famous Jay, to answer your second question, it says you're referring to the free agency for the playoffs. Your league playoffs, you can pick up free agents up until the championship. After that, it locks. You can't pick up anybody because you're competing against everybody else for $1 million. So if that's hopefully that answered your question. But once your league playoffs is over, you cannot pick up any more free agents. It's
come the championship round. It's rosters essentially lock.
My team that made the championship last year with one of the best players that's playing right now. We had Jalen Hurts by himself. No other quarterback, and I'm sure a bunch of other teams in the shootout last year had him, and that didn't work out for us because as quality as our team was, with no quarterback, you're not winning anything.
Dave Gladstone in the chat. We always love his comments. Dave said Etienne was the previous staff's investment, and last year's short yardage situations were below average at best. Doesn't seem to be an Etienne fan. Sure. Any response? I mean, no. I think it is the Etienne pick.
Fair. I mean, everything he said is pretty much spot on.
Sure. The only thing I'll refute real quick is he was the last staff's investment. I don't think that doesn't change him as a player. I think he's a player that Doug Peterson would be a big fan of.
And he's a guy that went to college with Trevor Lawrence. Yeah. If Trevor Lawrence has any say, Etienne's not going anywhere. I mean, I don't see a path that Bigsby takes over that job. I'm not saying it's not possible because it definitely is possible. He's getting a lot of hype. He looks good in the preseason, but it's just so like this year I've been trying to take a step back from the preseason to try not to get caught up in some of these guys who are just skyrocketing up boards just because they're having a preseason play. Like it's so hard not to because this is all we do. We draft, we watch football, we draft, we watch football, we draft some more. We draft in the day, we draft in the night. We're drafting all day, and we see, Darnell Mooney catch a, 80-yard touchdown. We're like, oh, wow. Why is he getting it? Why is he going in the 14th round? Let's move him up 3 rounds and then 4 rounds if he does. It gets crazy sometimes. We've seen it over the years of guys getting hyped up in preseason. Marquise Callaway, Terrace Marshall, guys who are just on nobody's radar that just get steamed up so bad to where they're just a landmine and just kill fantasy teams.
Would you agree with my previous statement? There's always a couple who get rapid rise, but for the most part of the FFPC, I find our players are less reactionary in a good way. They're not going to overreact to a preseason highlight, but it's a more of a gradual rise. That's how I felt because you would
James Cook. I'll use somebody like James Cook as for the example. I mean, is it warranted he's getting moved up? Seems like he's playing all the the number 1 snaps. He's out there with Josh Allen and all that good stuff. So yeah, that seems like it makes sense. But then you look at a guy like Luke Musgrave, who's moving up from undrafted in some of these early contests to like the 11th round he got drafted, 12th round.
Yeah.
Is that warranted? Like, I know he's the only guy there, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. Like, the hype, all he has to do is catch a touchdown in the 3rd game. He's going to move up into single-digit rounds. Is that warranted? I think it is, but I was on Luke Musgrave in that offense before he got steamed up here. So that's where you have to just watch. Like, they're just 2 players that I mentioned. There's a bunch of other ones that are here, getting drafted, Sky Moore getting moved up drafts, Zay Flowers getting moved up in drafts. And then you can look at the opposite way too. Guys that are just people just hate. Everybody hates Michael Pittman. Everybody hates him. Cortland Sutton, everybody hates him after last year. Michael Thomas, everybody hates. Kadarius Toney, everybody hates. Nobody wants to draft Treylon Burks right now. Rashad Bateman, people still hate, even though he's back on the field. I mean, we can go down a list of just guys that preseason could put you in a big landmine. Trust your eyes, trust what your projections, and then whatever happens, happens. You don't want to get caught up in a preseason hype monster that just ruins all the time you put in the offseason.
there's a name that I mentioned who, and then we focus kind of on Kincaid, Juwan Johnson, who is a name that I know you're a big fan of, and I'm not trying to give you names in your wheelhouse, but Juwan Johnson, there's something to be said when the quarterback is hyping him as much up as Derek Carr is. I believe I saw somewhere, and I probably should have verified it, but it was something along the lines of Derek Carr had been telling David Carr, like, oh, you want to draft Juwan Johnson in fantasy. And we've heard this story before, and it doesn't always work out.
Of course.
Juwan Johnson is a talent, I think. He had flashes last year. I know the Taysom Hill equation is always going to be there. But Michael Thomas, we can't say healthy. We all love Chris Olave. But Juwan Johnson, I think, very well could be there, that the second best receiver on that team, and a guy who Derek Carr uses as a safety valve. So I'm expecting him. I think I mentioned I want to hear if you agree or disagree. I think he hits single-digit rounds on the ADP, but not crazy, just like mid-ninth, late ninth in the next couple of weeks.
I hope he doesn't personally, because he's a guy that been drafting a ton when he pretty much was getting ignored in drafts for a really long time. If I'm punting the position, Juwan Johnson's the guy with Dalton Kincaid, that Tyler Higbee, that I'm perfectly okay with starting my tight end room with. If I'm just punting the position, not getting one of the elite guys, I mean, if you're just starting off heavy receiver, running back, whatever you're doing, I feel like they give you the best chance to be, serviceable at the position with upside. To me, Juwan Johnson has top 5 upside. Does that mean he's going to get there? No, it doesn't. But he's a guy that I could see being every year. There's always a guy that gets up there in the top 10, top 5 or 10. He's a guy that I feel like could really get there. Derek Carr seems to like him, seems to be positive so far. Obviously, you have Olave taking a lot of attention. If you get a healthy Michael Thomas, I think that only helps Juwan Johnson. I know Moreau's behind him. That's a little bit of annoyance. Jimmy Graham, annoyance. But that team is the best team in that division. And I just like his talent. I like what he brings to the table. To me, one of my favorite tight ends. And I really like the value the Team 12 got on. I hope he doesn't make it to single digits, though.
Am I being too nostalgic in a little bit of Aaron Rodgers love I'm about to give you? Because we love all the weapons, and we talk about that receiving room, and we talk about hopefully he's going to be on a better team. I know there's maybe my concern could be maybe I think there's been some concerns, maybe the O-line. And there's also, are they just going to run the ball a lot? They have the Breece Hall and Dalvin backfield. But at some point to me, Aaron Rodgers, long story short, because at QB 16, I just can't help but think Aaron Rodgers has some value with the amount that we hype up his weapons and are kind of hyping up that Jets team. I just can't help but think that Aaron Rodgers is going to maybe outproduce some of his ADP.
The Jets, to me, are just from day one. Aaron Rodgers signed there. They've been a roller coaster for me. Mm-hmm. I just can't I love Garrett Wilson. That's been known. But outside of Garrett Wilson, I don't really love anybody else on that team that I'm like banging the table for. I've said the Jets are going to win the division. I think the Jets can win the Super Bowl, but I could also see a path where the Jets are just a complete and utter disaster and just everything blows up. I know their defense is really good, but something about Aaron Rodgers this year is starting to I don't know, just tickled me the wrong way. And when it comes to that, like, that division's no joke. New England's going to be annoying. I don't think they're any good, but they're just going to be annoying. Bills and Dolphins, obviously high-powered offenses, serviceable defenses. But outside of Garrett Wilson, he's probably the only guy I'm drafted. I just really feel like you're going to see, the elite of Garrett Wilson, and I feel like he's a knockoff right now, obviously, of Davante Adams when it comes to Aaron Rodgers. And Aaron Rodgers would be stupid not to pepper him with targets. So Will I draft Aaron Rodgers? He's not somebody that I've been targeting a ton. I just drafted him in a best ball the other day, because I had Breece Hall, because I had Garrett Wilson. I would never take him without those two guys personally.
Fair points all around. I feel like you never want to be that guy who kind of instantly goes back on what he said, but I was just kind of looking at it, and I do think I'm a little bit higher on Rodgers. I do think his upside, just also maybe a product of the team around him, could be better. But then I'm looking at the QBs drafted in front of him, and I'm kind of like, I don't know how many of them I would actually take Rodgers over. So his ADP, maybe I should rephrase my statement to QB 16 feels like the right spot, but it wouldn't shock me if he outperforms that and finishes.
And that's 100% correct statement.
Yeah.
Like Aaron Rodgers,
that's the better way to say it.
Aaron Rodgers in the 14th round with Dak Prescott, no issues with that whatsoever. Dak Prescott's not an elite quarterback, no matter what anybody tries to say. I was arguing with some moron on Twitter the other day is trying to tell me that Dak Prescott is in the same category as Jalen Hurts. Just stop with that, craziness. But when you have a Dak Prescott led team, Aaron Rodgers is not a guy that I have any issues taking as a backup.
Wait, someone's tried to say Dak was better than Jalen Hurts, you said?
He was a Cowboys fan. He was trying to say that I was saying, well, Jalen, we were arguing about, because you saw Colin Cowherd. It wasn't Colin Cowherd. Somebody on First Take came out and said the Cowboys are more talented than the Eagles. And I said, where are they more talented? And I was going position by position with this idiot. He was trying to say quarterback. Hurts might be a little better, but I don't really see it. I think they're kind of the same. And I'm just trying to sit here and say, like, all right, you might not agree that Hurts is going to continue on his rise, and that's fair. But how do you support Dak Prescott as a Cowboys fan? Like, what on earth could you sit here and say that says Dak Prescott gives you encouragement as a Cowboys fan? It's absolute craziness. Dallas Cowboys are the most delusional, in all of sports. And we'll just stop there because I can keep going with these bozos. They're not winning the division this year. In my opinion, they don't even finish in the top 2 in the division. They don't make the playoffs. I have a feeling you have a better chance of disaster in Dallas than a Super Bowl. Super Bowl? Come on, man.
You arguing on Twitter, that was your first issue.
First issue. But sometimes I just getting in the weeds. I don't usually do it. I used to do it a lot when I was younger, and
it's entertaining. It can be entertaining,
and I'm still immature in some cases. And I just like getting in the pits with people. And I commented on some guy, some post that some guy posted about how the Eagles and the Cowboys were the better team, and some people try to get in the pits, and you just have to put them in the body bag and keep them moving.
Terp, I got to be honest. Arguing on Twitter, just the way it's formatted, isn't always best. If you want to get into arguments just for entertainment's sake, go on Facebook. You should see some of the football takes on there.
I used to do that all the time. I used to do that all the time.
Crazy.
You see, some of your friends' Facebook. They're obviously, I'm no one special in the grand scheme of things, but I think I have knowledge over a lot of people.
Yeah.
You see some of these just complete brain dead takes on sports, and it's dude, I can't. I just can't. I just can't go on in arguments with just bona fide bozos. And Facebook is just where you can find them. We used to have some real battles back in the day on the FFPC Facebook battles. We had some just complete, just interesting characters that came on there and just had some I had to put the phone down because they were just so bad.
We have obviously fantasy receipts has bumped onto the space, right, for fantasy football.
Coming
Twitter.
for blood too this week. I saw
you see
coming after player profile. They're coming after everybody. Just
they're on the space. What we need is just a Twitter account that just screenshots Facebook fantasy football takes. And that gets hundreds of thousands of followers, I'm convinced, because that's.
Me and Balky talked about coming out with a fantasy football police Twitter page, just policing people in their bad lineup decisions and their bad draft picks and all this stuff. I don't really care about players' takes because to me, player takes are just your personal thing, and if they go wrong, you own them and you keep it moving. It's just when you look at the drafts and some of your drafts and you look back and you're just like, man, if I just drafted Cooper Kupp over Robert Woods, my season would have been totally different. And I had the ability to do it. Anybody can sit here and go, well, Cooper Kupp got hurt last year. That's why my season was ruined. Well, obviously. But when you're staring at a 1v1 matchup and you're just like, if I just did this, don't start adding up the points because it'll give you a massive anxiety.
Terp, as much as I got us started on this road, as much as I'm sure that people watching want to hear about us discuss fantasy football Facebook, they don't. They want to hear us discuss this draft. Patrick Mahomes' comments on Justin Ross, I believe it was something along the lines of, this dude is different. We don't have a wide receiver like him. That is that is over. That was a bang on that emphasis by you right there. That is some positive.
Totally by accident, but kind of fit perfectly.
That is some real positive buzz for Justin Ross from the best quarterback in the game, and a guy who first off, I think it was the backup quarterback. I think it was Gabbert was in at the time. Ross shook the corner wide open to the end zone. It was overthrown into the back corner. He had some great route running. Survived that little injury scare. I mean, I think you and me both. You're buying in at this 16th round ADP. It's just why not?
Gotta buy in at it.
But the buzz is growing, and it kind of feels like we're hitting, you hit a point last year with Pacheco where you really start to buy in and be like, maybe this is for real and not just the classic preseason sleeper who doesn't amount to anything. Justin Ross is starting to feel that way. And Patrick Mahomes is right. I don't know if they have a receiver like him on the roster.
People are still worried about, obviously, the injury. People are still worried about, is he going to make the team? I don't see a path where he does not make the team unless he gets hurt. Unless there's a serious injury or something that slows him down. It just comes down to the crowded room. I mean, does he become the guy early in the season? Like, what is his path to being a top target on that team? Will they give him opportunities early in the season? You know, he's playing against second-tier talent. Let's call it what it is. I love Justin Ross. I will take him in the 17th round of every draft if I have the ability to do it. Nothing negative to say about the player, but this is a team that wants to win another Super Bowl. They like good stories, but they're not going to put a guy out there if they don't feel like he's ready. So I trust what Patrick Mahomes is saying. I buy the ability of Justin Ross. And if you're taking him in the 16th, 17th round where he's being drafted, I mean, you won't find a better draft pick. And the best part about a draft pick like him is if it doesn't work out, you're not investing any capital on him, and you can ship him out as quick as possible.
Yeah, he goes at the 1606 today. On average, the last 5 days, per Fantasy Mojo, been going at the 1702.
Crazy. I'm shocked he's not moving up.
Earliest he's gone is in the last 5 days. In the main event is the 1504. The latest, 1908.
Justin Ross, 16th round versus Dusty Allen Lazard in the 12th round. Stop. Just stop. What?
Talk about. Yeah, no, it's opportunity. The Chiefs, I mean, again, we've talked about it. Richie James, he's been going. I just had it up. He's been going in the late 17th. He's worth a dart throw. I've been on the record. I think he is a little bit better for best ball, although there was some good points. I think we've had so many guests on. I'm losing. I think Dan Williamson mentioned how it's a little bit deceiving. Marcus Valdez-Scantling's kind of big game. He only had a couple last year, but I do think he's sometimes worth just a super late dart throw. One of those Chiefs receivers is probably going to amount to something. Sky Moore seems like the likely candidate with Tony's injury, but the Justin Ross buzz is here, and I think he's going to be able to do something. Another guy is going to start flying up. Jalen Hyatt. We weren't high on him. A lot of that had to do with coming out of the draft, I should say. A lot of that had to do with the system he played in college. And then it really is funny how Brian Dable goes, you know what? All right, I'm just going to use the exact same kind of play schemes that he ran in college and just
He's not an idiot. Dabble's a smart coach. I mean, he's a guy that knows what he's doing. I mean, Daniel Jones continues to take that next step, and some people think he is. I do. I think, like I said, the Giants are the second best team in that division. It just comes down to will Hyatt get enough of those to warrant being drafted, and in the 17th round in a non-best ball format, you got to take a shot. In a best ball format, you definitely got to take a shot because you're looking for spike weeks. And he is, to me, right there with Justin Ross. And I think he's, in my opinion, a higher spike week potential because you've seen these monster games in college. And will that happen in the NFL? Probably not. But he gets off for a 120 game and a touchdown for a 17th round draft pick. That is a massive win over the field. So he's a guy that I've been targeting a ton lately. It just makes too much sense. I'm not sitting here saying it could just be a total flop. It's possible. But with that speed and that big playability, definitely a guy that I've been adding a bunch. Like I said, we talk about a bunch on these shows, like the dead zones this year. I think there's definitely a wide receiver dead zone in like the 10th round, 10th to 13th round. Then I think it opens up a little bit. And I think some of these receivers that are being drafted 14th round plus, KJ Osborne, Rondell Moore, Darnell Mooney, Jaden Reed, Van Jefferson, Alec Pierce, Justin Ross, Jalen Hyatt, Michael Gallup. They all have potential value, and you're talking about 5-6 rounds less than guys like, Odell Beckham and Alan Lazard and even Nico Collins and Juju, Jamison Williams, Isaiah Hodges, 13th round.
The leader for maybe worse offseason is probably Jamison Williams, from a guy who was 5th, 6th round, and now he is just
very
injury, suspension. Don't love the usage.
Pounding early and just still taking him when he was suspended. Just I don't get it. And that is going to be annoying for fantasy owners because another thing, like the receiver in that, who's the guy you're going to count on besides St. Brown?
Josh Reynolds.
We talk about that Thursday night game.
Laporta
in the 20th round. Josh Reynolds, Marvin Jones might not be might not be the worst 20th round pick you can get because you plug them in. Hey, if it works out, if not, they're your first cut, or you're wrong. It's definitely everything is something you got to pay attention to. And Jameson Williams, there's no guarantee that if he comes back in week 6, week 7, whatever, and that he's going to be the guy. So it doesn't seem like Dan Campbell's a fan of him, and he's hamstrung already. It's definitely something to watch.
Terp, 8 quarterbacks have gone on the board since the start of the 12th round. So Gino will be our cutoff. Of those 8 names it started in round 14 with Aaron Rodgers. Which of those names is most likely to finish as a top 5 quarterback? We saw it last year. Gino did it. Daniel Jones, Jared Goff were top 10, kind of out of nowhere in some respects. But in terms of they were getting drafted in this range last year, who is that name this year?
I'll mention 5, and then I'll pick one at the end. Jared Goff. There's 5, all the way to 17. Terp. I'm going to pick one, though. Don't worry. I'm going to pick one at the end.
I was going to say you can't say Jordan Love because we've already given him. I forgot to mention that, but you can include him. But
Jordan Love is included. Jared Goff, Kenny Pickett, Russell Wilson, and Brock Purdy. I feel like they all have plenty of upside, based off their situations. They make a ton of sense. Gun to my head, it's Kenny Pickett. I really think he's a guy that could get up into that level. They have the weapons. They have the vision that they have to throw the ball. They're not just gonna be able to win defensively and win ugly football games. They know this year that they're gonna have to move the ball down the field. There's not gonna be an ugly, potential, football. You're not gonna see it there. Lamar's gonna be better. Deshaun Watson hopefully takes that next step, and we all know the Bengals are gonna be putting up points. So if I had a gun to my head, Kenny Pickett, Russell Wilson would be a close second.
Kenneth Shane Pickett is Terp's choice for quarterback most likely to finish in the top 5, who's getting drafted as QB 15.
But another guy that I mentioned, and I don't understand, like, we talk about tight ends getting moved up. It seems like quarterbacks are just getting moved down. Like, why is Brock Purdy still a 17th round draft pick? With that offense, like, I'm not the biggest Brock Purdy guy, but I mean, if you told me I could stack up every position on my team, all of them, to like tight end, wide receiver, running back, and my quarterbacks could possibly be Russell Wilson and Brock Purdy, I don't hate that. I'm not sitting here saying you're not behind, but there's past that. I mean, you saw Brock Purdy in the playoffs last year before he got whooped by the Eagles.
I don't know.
I saw the Seattle game.
I don't know about that. I don't think Brock Purdy is that much better than Jimmy Garoppolo.
Oh, I don't think he is either, but I'm just saying that you can see.
But you wouldn't draft Jimmy Garoppolo if he was still the Niners quarterback. I don't see the path because there's going to be so many games where they're just running the ball into the ground. We're just doing little check. I just don't know if
the offensive weapons that he has, which are I'm not
the top 5 is just a stretch to me, right? Obviously,
I don't see him getting in the top 5 personally, but I'm just saying, like, I'm surprised he hasn't moved up a couple rounds.
Like, I could Oh yeah, I could see that. I mean, again,
I can never see a world where Brock Purdy's a top 5 quarterback.
But like, no, yeah, I see what you were just saying. Moved up, but there is worlds where like him still going behind Derek Carr, Kyler Murray is a big one. Yeah, I would be moving him. I could understand most besides those 2, the other names going ahead of him, but we saw him get moved up in the Superflex draft that we covered.
This absolutely craziness. We can't even talk about that one anymore.
That we saw him get moved up there, but no, yeah, you would think you would start seeing him at least hit top 15 rounds just because of sheer product, the weapons that he has. I think my choice will be just Jared Goff because he was already, I believe,
that's the popular choice. That's a choice.
It's an easy, but it's like it's just the safe one by me.
It makes sense, and there's no downside to that. Obviously, adding Gibbs, adding Laporta, St. Brown continues to move up drafts. Nothing negative to say about that. Goff would have been the easy selection, probably the right selection, but
you're buying the Kenny Pickett.
I'm buying the Steelers, preseason positivity
for sure. Terp, let's go to where do I want to go next? We're not talking about kickers. We talked about kickers on the Superflex stream, which who knows how that happened when the kickers weren't even being drafted. Terp, let's talk about Michael Mayer, who's a name that you and me both liked. He's kind of, you haven't heard the same buzz that you heard about Sam Laporta, Dalton Kincaid. Raiders aren't going to be great. But then again, I can't help but think is just if Garoppolo is kind of their starter O'Connell, that Mayer could be a nice little safety valve. And that's where Garoppolo thrives. I've mentioned this probably about a month ago. I had almost this exact same thing about how Meyer's skill set fits into Jimmy Garoppolo. I'm still on that. Are you almost buying the value and liking the dip? Or are you kind of feeling as though the lack of press has dissuaded you a bit? But again, it's 18th round. So it's like,
I don't mind lack of press in preseason. I mean, even on rookies, but you got to look at the situation. Austin Hooper is the only guy ahead of him. Receiving core, obviously, you have Davante Adams and Jacoby Myers, but Hunter Renfrow, you don't know if he's even any good. Mm-hmm. Josh Jacobs still not in camp. That offense could be very, very bad. And that might not mean anything right now, but like a guy like Michael Mayer could be a free agent. He still should be drafted in all drafts, obviously with the tight end premium. Guy that I'm targeting in the 18th round. No issues whatsoever there. I'm buying the dip, just like you said. But he's a guy that you could be adding late in the season if somebody just can't have any patience on him. And like your boy, Aiden O'Connell gets in there when the Raiders are out of there, you could be seeing something that, could present a Tyler Higbee of a couple of years ago, of a guy who comes on the scene late that's just learn the system, learn behind a veteran, a guy that's not going to set the world on fire right away, but he's definitely a guy that I pay attention. Like there's certain guys that once the draft's over, whether they're drafted or they're not drafted, you just write down and you pay attention to, see what they're doing week in and week out. He will definitely be a name that I'm targeting, right off the jump. If the tight end room gets a little ugly or I have a free roster spot, because I feel like he's a guy that could, maybe not right away, but down the road could really, really help you because he's not getting the hype. And that's kind of good in some cases.
Just like looking at the names, it wouldn't shock me if Mayer, I think, especially because I do think the most likely scenario, it seems like, is that he finishes the year super strong and gets kind of a lot of run and positive performances down that stretch. There's a lot of names, even we're looking at the 10th round on right now, who could kind of fall off the map. Higbee,
14th round, Zach Ertz. I know he's back and he's going to be ready, but I don't see how that, this could be a whole Javonte Williams thing, but I don't. Zach Ertz.
It's also the offense is just bad.
So bad. And why would they stunt Trey McBride's development?
If Ertz is okay, I assume he gets moved. I don't think he stays.
I would be surprised. I could see him getting cut to get, he'd just be like, dude, I don't want to get out there and play for this team. Some of these teams that like the Miami Dolphins and
did
situations
Ertz
like that
from Philly, or was it did he leave in free agency?
He got traded.
I just wanted to recall if he's been traded before. Yeah. But my point in this is there's a lot of names you're looking at these 10th round on in the tight end position who I generally think could kind of fall off the map next year. That Mayer I would expect to pass. Ertz, Higbee, Schultz, Dulcich, or Smith, Conklin, Hayden Hurst. There's just a lot of names of guys who, I'm not saying every single one will, but
you can keep going.
A good amount of them.
Jake
Ferguson. Cole Kmet could just put together another
Gerald Everett. I mean, you don't
gotta love Gerald Everett though, just because
I love him too. I love that offense, but you could easily see a path to where they get some young, hot name in there and he gets phased out.
Sean Tucker is here, Terp. I think this is talk about a guy who spikes up.
Perfect time to talk about him.
I think this is not a ton, not crazy, not like Musgrave, but you're seeing, I think, by the end of this, probably 16th, 17th round, because there's a lot of people out there who don't love Rachaad White. Sean Tucker's look good. Sean Tucker has a good track record. He was good in college. A little bit injury concerns slipped him to an undrafted. But by all accounts,
the health concerns were
he's
the major
tracking
issue.
to RB2 in that Buccaneers offense, and who knows what White's deal is. So the Sean Tucker kind of arrival is here, really emerged, I would say, in the past couple of days. So give me your thoughts on Sean Tucker, and obviously now in the 19th round, I'm sure you're taking him here. But where do you foresee him going? We got about I believe it's 2 weeks. It's only 2 weeks now until the season kicks off. 2.5 weeks until Thursday.
I think he'll be moving up probably a round or two. I don't think he's going to get too crazy.
Okay.
Just because Rachaad White's still there. I mean, if he got banged up at all, I think it might be a little bit different. But he's the perfect guy you target late in drafts. He's a guy that, you try to have some patience with it. You realize that early in the season, he's not going to get a lot of work. But if Rachaad White is just not getting the job done, or he gets, banged up with a minor injury, Tucker, why not Tucker? You believe in Chase Edmonds, Keyshawn Vaughn? Like, you've seen the last couple of years, neither of them can get it done. If Tucker didn't have his medicals and he would have been a way higher draft pick. He's very talented, coming out of college. I like the player. 19th round, no issues whatsoever.
Yeah, just intrigued to see his rise. Terp, Chris Evans, kind of we talked about. Seen this story before, Chris Evans, but there's a little more uncertainty with Joe Mixon. And then right next to him, Keontae Ingram, who's a guy you've discussed kind of intensively, actually, because he's a guy we kind of consistently focus on with James Conner's injury history, the kind of uncertainty in Arizona, who's going to be playing. Maybe it's Ingram down the stretch. Chris Evans, obviously, got a lot of buzz this weekend, and then Keontae Ingram. Who are you drafting? I'm assuming the answer is Ingram, but can you kind of play devil's advocate and give me the case for both?
Yeah, the answer is still Ingram. The answer will never not be Ingram. Chris Evans was the guy that I bought into last year, bought into a little bit of the hype that he was going to be Mixon's backup, and that was just a colossal miss. It wasn't getting drafted too early, so it didn't really hurt in any way, but best ball is a little different because you're taking zeros, and any time in a 20-round draft, you're taking zeros every week. That doesn't help you. But Trevion Williams, still not back from the injury, is definitely a guy that I'd watch. Chase Brown will be fine. I think he's just a rookie, just learning the NFL. He's not a guy that, day one you're going to be able to count on, but if something happens to Mixon, he's still the most talented back out there. I'm not worried about Chris Evans. He's a guy that, you see a couple puff pizzas and a couple guys writing his name down in the industry. That means he's going to get drafted now. I don't think it's a draft pick that I'd make. I'll take up, Keontae Ingram. We talked about Sean Tucker. Even a guy like Deion Jackson, with uncertainty right now with the Colts, seems to have a role pretty much, secured. No, nothing really is to say on Chris Evans that, passing downs. We thought he was going to get all the passing downs last year, and he didn't get them. So I'll take my chances elsewhere. Keontae Ingram's a guy that I've talked about multiple times. Not saying I love the player, but the opportunity could be too good to pass up on a team that's just atrocious. They might try to see what they got in the player. No real, targets there. No real guys to worry about behind, obviously James Conner. So it's hard to make a case for Evans, but it's Ingram for me.
Terp, last 4 picks here. We would like to thank everyone for kind of tuning in, watching along, discussing the picks with us. Terp, my last question for you, I'm going to put you on the spot. I want an honest answer because we kind of talked extensively, saying, hey, we're not always right. We're wrong often. And we kind of talk about some of our past misses. So my question for you is, of the guys that you've been most vocal about in positive sense that you're on this year, there's always the ones that you're most vocal and you're putting out all the positive propaganda for, and you're drafting a ton. But deep down inside, the one that is kind of you're the most nervous about, who is that one for you?
Antonio Gibson's probably the name that if I had he's my number 1 player right now, but he definitely comes with some worries. I mean, obviously I believe in Eric Bieniemy. I saw what he did with the Chiefs. He's definitely a guy that I believe in as a player. I think he definitely has, high round upside. The question is, is Brian Robinson going to be there? He's going to be annoying. Is Curtis Samuel potentially going to play that role, which will be annoying? Does Sam Howell, take that step to where he can warrant Dotson, McLaren, Gibson, Robinson? Can they all be fantasy relevant? So he's probably my biggest worry. I mean, besides that, my biggest worry new is Trey McBride, because he's the guy that I've been on a lot more. The Zach Ertz thing is just kind of annoying to me, and I just think Jonathan Gannon's a nitwit. So who knows what they're going to do there? I could see McBride, taking a little bit longer than to emerge with the annoyance of Zach Ertz ahead of him.
I'm still pretty supremely confident, but mine, I would have to say, mainly because of the lack of the push up. I feel like we talked about him kind of a lot this show, but the Jahmyr Gibbs, it's more so the lack of him getting boosted up. There's a little bit, am I missing something here? Like his kind of relative stability when I think he should be skyrocketing.
I don't understand it either.
Another name though I'll give you, just because of, it's not even necessarily a situation, but just kind of his unhappiness and then injuries, is J.K. Dobbins is a guy I'm going to be pushing extensively. His ADP seems to be adjusting, but it was really when he was a value. You could get him later. I don't know why you're not taking this guy with that offense. But there's always that gut with, it seems like pretty much every year he's been in the league, something hasn't gone right with him. And that's a little bit hard to kind of shake off. So I'll give you J.K. Dobbins and Jahmyr Gibbs are probably my two guys I'm most on so far, who I'm a little bit iffy on. But that's going to do it for us, Terp. We won't be back Tuesday night. Eric Balkman will be back Tuesday night covering a Fantasy Pros Championship draft with the from Fantasy Pros, Derek Brown. And then Terp will be back Wednesday night. We'll be covering for the first time on the FFPC YouTube a Dynasty Startup Draft. We'll have a guest on. Hey, if you want to be our guest, email us. We've been searching for them, so please let us know. But we will have guests on for that. Excited to cover it because it's going to be a unique thing we're doing. Again, thank you to everyone who tuned in. Happy drafting. FFPC main event drafts are going off every day, filling every day at myffpc.com. $1 million grand prize, 5.91 million in the prize pool. That's going to do it for myself, Dave Tripoli, Eric Balkman, and Derek Brown. We'll see you guys Tuesday night. We'll see you guys Wednesday night.
See you next week.